Welcome to the Futures Forum Live online, where we explore the landscape and byways of our shared futures. On this edition of the Futures Forum Live, we exchange ideas, information, education, and inspiration about the future of Black America. For more information, visit www.thefuturesforum.org. Get Futures Sense now. Share this story and share our future. Stay tuned for a journey to the future with host Dr. Claire Nelson.
Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Futures Forum Live, an online e-magazine of the Futures Forum. February is Black History Month in the United States of America, and this year I decided to have a conversation on the future history of Black America 3.0, I call it sometimes. What I'd like to do is examine what life in the U.S. might be for people of African descent in the year 2030 and beyond. And I can't wait to dig into this episode because I'll be speaking with somebody who spends half of her life in the future. Yes, she does, because she's a speculative fiction writer. So I want you to welcome with me my guest on this session, Ceres Wright, who is a writer of published cyberpunk novel COG. She has a master's degree in writing popular fiction books from Seton Hill University. And this book, COG, was published in 2030 under the science fiction imprint of the Raw Dog Screaming Press. She also has quite a few short stories, such as Luminescent Threads, connections to Octavia Butler, one of my favorite ladies, Psychorex's Daughters, Emanations, and several other things that all talk about life in 2060 and beyond. So I believe I'm going to have a delightful conversation. One last thing I must share is that she's the founder and president of the Diverse Writers and Artists of Speculative Fiction, a support group for people who are writing this kind of literature for us to enjoy and contemplate. Without further ado, I'd like to just welcome you, Ceres Wright, to the Futures.
Hey.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm so happy you could take time to join us. I'm really excited because I think you're probably one of the few people I know of and have actually met in terms of writing speculative fiction. And if you are a fan of Octavia Butler and writing about connections to her, I'm certainly going to be a fan of your writing. So tell us, COG was set in 2060. What's the premise of that book? I want to start there.
It's a cyberpunk book. So it's set in the not too far future, but it's in the future. And the story centers around Nicole Ryder, who is a curator at a holographic art museum. And
wait. All of these things. First of all, what is a cyberpunk? What's that genre?
that genre is set in the near future, usually in a dystopian, with a dystopian background. There's usually corporations that rule everyone's life and take over the government, and
like something like this.
Drug use and devaluation of human life.
Okay, so your book is set in 2060 something.
Yes.
And the hero does what?
The hero is a curator at a holographic art museum. For example, they now have the technology. If you want to see artworks from the Prado, but you live in Southeast DC and you can't afford to go to the Prado, then they can bring the Prado to you by setting up hologram emitters at the Prado and sending the data to someplace in Southeast, and you can roam the Prado or the Hermitage.
First of all, you have just sort of made me leap, because let me tell you, I had the opportunity to be a hologram. And this was when I told my story of being the first Jamaican on the moon. And it's a new genre of personal storytelling I'm trying to develop, which I'm calling storied futures or few stories, which people in the storytelling community don't really like, because they like you to tell things that have already happened to you. So I am talking about 2036 and what happened to me personally.
Excellent.
Basing it on the trends that are driving change. So this is actually fantastic. So I'm in this holographic museum, right, in 2060 now. So let's not give the story away, people. If you want to see hear more, you need to buy the book COG, all right? But I like that as a starting place because you're going to bring us back now, given that holograms already exist. I want you to bring us back to 2035, 2036, because there's no reason to assume that a holographic museum could not exist in 2036.
That is true.
Given the technology right now. So on that basis, let's begin our conversation then. As a speculative fiction writer and the kind of assumptions you're making about the trajectory of our future, what might then this hero be doing in 2030 something?
She would probably be just setting up maybe some still images of individual paintings and experimenting with sending them to another location so that people can see something not on a two-dimensional screen, but in a three-dimensional screen that shows the texture and the vitality of the painting.
Yeah, no, so these pages, so no, this is really good because as you look now on, say, the social justice movements of Black America of this time, right? And the images of the Black Lives Matter movements, let's say these now become paintings or these become still life images. Between, let's say, now and 2030, what are some
I would say
that might emerge?
With a social movement, I think protesting, if you could transmit a hologram, people can be marching in their own living rooms and they can project those images onto the streets and they can take over the streets with images if they want to protest, you know, the government or whatever's going on. I think, and it could be anywhere. You could be living in Seattle and you want to protest something in DC and you can project yourself to a protest there. You know, I think that would be great because not everybody can afford to go to DC.
So in this sense, one might say the future revolution might be actually, well, the word would not be
holographized.
So, but this might sound very weird talking about this, but when we think about the year 2030, right, and to come back to the reality of the emerging politics, we just had a series of conversations with government shutdown in the Maryland area. You do live in this area, so you really are kind of plugged into the inside the beltway. So as you think about what's happening right now and how that's affecting people of African descent, as somebody who is writing speculative fiction from the perspective of a woman of African descent, what might you imagine 2030 to really be like?
Oh my goodness. I think that would depend on what groundwork we lay now. I mean, if you look at the financial situation of the Black family, of Black people, it's dire. One study in the Guardian magazine said that, the Guardian newspaper said that by 2053, the net worth of Black families will be zero because it's trending downward. The same for Latinos, as opposed to whites, which is going up. So you're going to have that to protest. The government, I mean, that's changing the policies.
Wow. I mean,
we can't depend on government for our well-being anymore because the policies are changing at the whim of the whatever political party is in power, you know, and that's unstable and inefficient. So we need to establish our own stable enterprises, from local businesses to healthcare and access to healthcare to wealth creation.
Right. So, I mean, so first of all, I had never even seen that statistic before, 2053, which I could very well be alive. I was in my 90s, so I'm interested in 2053. we'll have a situation when the Black family's income is near to zero. So as we think about this, and as the role of the storyteller, right? You're a storyteller.
Yes.
Do you feel that this cornucopia, if you will, of dystopian filmmakers serve as a distraction, or in fact further push us into fear and therefore into inaction? Or do you feel like there are enough storytellers out there about a positive visions of the future that will enable us to move in that direction? What do you think is going on?
I think there's a dearth of positive stories. I think cyberpunk came out in the 80s, and it's grown and it's lulled, but right now it's growing again with the Blade Runner 2049. That was dystopia. But I think there's a new genre coming out called solar punk, which is more positive, and that's based on the use of green energy to reduce our carbon footprint and to cast a positive outlook for the future. So I think we have both. We have dystopia and utopia, and they're always going to be on the same side of the coin. It's just unevenly distributed. If you're poor, if you live in the inner cities, that's a dystopia. If you're rich and you can afford to live in a place that has access to solar energy and healthcare and all the other things we need, then you're going to have a pretty good outlook for the future. So,
but I guess one of my concerns as somebody who kind of watches development agendas and really wants to see communities who have been excluded find a way to move towards inclusive prosperity. So the United Nations talks about 2030. We talk about Sustainable Development Goal 10, which is about inequality. And so we know inequality is a big driver in America, right?
Yes.
So to come back to this utopia, dystopia, solar punk, right?
Yes.
If you know of people who are creating these images, is there a community of African-American writers writing in this genre? And how do we make this genre of solar punk more accessible to the policymakers? Because people are saying that a lot of the technology we see today came out of Star Trek. A lot of policy around space technology was based on Star Trek. So how can solar punk writers in the African-American community help to influence what policymakers in the African-American community are thinking about?
I think we need collaboration. We need education, and we need collaboration across industries, across energy, across education, across politics, because we need government to enact the decisions. Suppose we have a shirt that can we get injured, and it'll automatically talk to the 911 system, and it'll automatically call an ambulance to come get us. But if the infrastructure is not there, then we can't take advantage of new technology. I think we need to educate people about positive and futuristic concepts. We need the language so that they can take those concepts to grassroots movements and put them into action.
So what is the diverse writers and artists of speculative fiction doing? I mean, are you planning to do anything around?
There's not too many Black science fiction writers, or a lot of them are, I would think, social science fiction, where they're dealing with, social issues, not as much technology issues. There's a lot of fantasy and horror writers, but pure science fiction, I think we definitely need more, and that's why I started my writer support group to encourage people.
So let's say you have 5 of you, and we now really are talking about, we have a new genre, we have a solar punk genre. We know that we have a challenge in terms of having the imagination, right, of our leaders. Our leaders are stuck in just reacting to what happens and not putting forward any brave new ideas. So first of all, first question is, do you feel any responsibility as somebody who is observing these challenges, as a writer and as a leader, having begun to convene this group to help shape this new generation of writing intentionally?
Now that I think about it, I think I do. And I think I can do that or help contribute to that through my writers group. I think I could put out a call for stories and articles about solar punk, about a positive future. I can put that in an anthology and print them. I can introduce those concepts on the website, on my social media platforms, and encourage other people to write such stories to give us some optimism for the future, because I think it is looking very bleak right now. And as artists, as writers, as creators, we need positivity. We need that hope, to keep us going.
Yeah, and I'm hearing you. I mean, I'm thinking this is so important that when we look at Black History Month, the reason why this series is called The Future History of Black America is because we're focused so much on history that many people relegate our icons, the Harriet Tubmans of this world or the Marcus Garveys of this world, to this like a two-dimensional historical figure in a book, not seeing them as flesh and blood, right?
Right.
Here you have as a writer, you're talking about in your own book, COG, you're talking about 2060 holographic museum. We have all these pictures, for example, of Marcus Garvey and the marches he did back in 2020. I could see a museum, a holographic museum of that in 2040, in 2038, for example. So that in this case, I mean, we have all these new movies being done, right? In the last couple of years, we've seen movies about Black history. But again, the movies are set in the past, and most people don't make the transition to see them as, well, how does this relate to the future we want to create? And so, as a writing group, in terms of if we're even able to get these ideas and these visions of the future we want into this solar punk and let's say Afro solar punk movement, let's call it that now, right? Let's make up a name, the Afro solar punk movement. I kind of like that.
I do too.
Afro solar movement. Hey, let's start a new movement, the Afro solar punk movement. Then how do we get it from our little niche of 20 people into a sitcom or into the usual ways in which this information is consumed by our public?
Well, we need to call upon our creators, our animators, our web designers, writers, editors. We need to write stories, have anthologies. Amateur filmmakers can make short films and submit them for, film festivals.
Do you think realistically, as we think about the idea of America being a majority minority country, right? So people think by 2030, the majority of African Americans, the majority of America will be minorities, with Hispanics, the largest group, then African Americans, right? So would you agree, if that is the case, that there is an urgent and pressing need to have a conversation then about what America might look like?
I think definitely. I think we need a new cabinet position actually on technology. We need to talk about how technology can benefit the public, especially Blacks and Latinos, because we have been held back. We are behind in education and wealth creation, and I think we can help make it up through the use of technology. I think with these groups, we need those partnerships among labor, business, government, community organizations. We need to transform the urban areas.
Have you found in your work, being someone who lives in this metro area, that when you have read your books, for example, that you get any uptake from educators, let's say in Prince George's County, one of the wealthiest Black counties in America? What do you find is a response to the work that you're doing?
It's positive. It's very positive. I think I'm starting off small, and slow, and I want to build. For example, we're looking into publishing an anthology, and I think the solar punk, Afro solar punk, would be an excellent idea, and thank you for that. I think this idea can spread, but I think with this genre, there's been sort of a pushback for science fiction and fantasy and horror in the literary world. You know,
Really?
I think,
In what
yeah,
sense?
when I applied for a master's in creative writing, I called, you know, creative writing programs, and I said I want to write science fiction, and they were like, "Oh no, we don't have science fiction." And I finally found a program that had the science fiction subspecialty, Seton Hill University, in their writing popular fiction program, and I was able to you know, study under people who actually wrote science fiction. But in general, in the literary world, no, it's science fiction, speculative fiction is looked down on. However, the average consumer likes,
Really? I had no
loves
idea.
speculative fiction. And, you know, with the upcoming Black Panther movie, that's another uh, positive point. It's going to come out February 16th, I think, 13th. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm really looking forward to that. In fact, I'm going to do a podcast on that after I see it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's the first time that a Black character, you know, was the king of his own country, and this African country is more technologically advanced than America or, you know, the European countries. And it's created a lot of hype in the Black community. And I think that after this movie, a lot of creators are going to want to create their own positive images and an image of a positive future.
No, no, this is good you mentioned that, because again, coming back to the education system, in terms of like the work that your network is doing, do you find then that the Black media houses have been supportive of even putting out whatever you're doing in science fiction and really making your work, helping to advance your work just as even writers?
Mm, Black media houses. I
Like print, whether the newspapers association, the morning talk shows, you know, which are syndicated that we listen to when we're driving to work. How have they been in the space in terms of supporting a conversation about a speculative future for Black America, especially now with all these different marches and protests every day about something?
I haven't really come across Black media outlets that are talking about Black future or Black speculative fiction. There's some, you know, with the Black Comic Cons. There was a Blurred Con in the DC area last summer. I was on a panel for that. You know, there might be an article or two, or, you know, a short video on the news or something, but nothing that's really fundamental and sweeping, you know, that's
To
highlighting.
keeping the conversation going.
Right.
So there's a challenge, then, if you will, in saying having us move from just seeing as though this is a bunch of writers over here. In other
Right.
words, they're not making a connection between what, you know, like in the beginning was the Word and the Word was made flesh. That in fact, a lot of the current policy in which we live was a story written by somebody, right? So
Right.
we are now living in a world in which it was written as a policy by somebody other than us, right?
Right.
And that policy came out of a fictional story written by somebody in 1940, right? Or
Right.
1960 about what the future would look like. And we're now living that future.
Right, exactly. And we need to change the narrative. We need to change the mechanisms through which we use to change policies. You know, the Middle Passage, we lost a lot of our stories. And, you know, through speculative fiction, we can reimagine what those stories could be, and we can take them into the future. And, you know, we can help write our own future. You know, despite our disadvantages despite people wanting to keep us down or hold us back. You know, there's new technology, so we can figure out new ways of overcoming those obstacles.
Right, exactly. So then as you think about 2030, I'd like to ask you, point blank, on the future we want, 2030 and beyond, because you're already writing 2060, right?
Right.
Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? Or are you what you call neutralistic in terms of our ability to shape that future through the use of story?
I want to be optimistic. I think you can change your outlook by taking action. And that's what I want to do. I want to be positive because I want to act positive. And I want to have a positive influence on other people, which will help spread the positive outlook. And I can do that.
So on that note,
I can encourage others to do it.
So on a note, so your character in COG, what is his name? Your hero?
Her name is Nicole Ryder.
So her Nicole Ryder. How old is she in 2030s? Is she born?
She was just born. Yes.
She's just born. So
yes.
What is the headline story that Nicole's mother, right, is writing or reading in the year that Nicole, your hero, is born?
That is a very good question.
That's a diabolical question, right? That's serious, because you also know who her mother is, right?
Right. She died when Nicole was young, but she remembers her vaguely.
Right. So, but you know, as a writer, you know who Nicole's mother is. And even the absence of Nicole's mother helped shape Nicole. But who was Nicole's mother, and what was happening when Nicole was born? What is that world? Because that world will shape who Nicole becomes in 2060, doesn't it? So tell me about a positive or aspirational view of the 2030 in which Nicole is born.
Well, within my COG universe, I would say something like researchers, her husband was Jaron. Jaron Ryder has pioneered a new holographic technique to transport holograms across space and time.
Okay, so in that case, if in 2030, folks, we're transforming holographs across space and time, as we all know already, artificial intelligence will be everywhere. With Internet of Things will be live and growing, right?
Yes.
We have Ceres Wright saying that she hopes for a positive future, right?
Yes, exactly. We need that.
So on your headline is again, remind us one last time.
Jaron Ryder pioneers a new technique to transfer holograms across space and time. And
Jaron Ryder's daughter, Nicole Ryder, is born.
Yes.
Read more about Nicole Ryder in another COG, written by Ceres Wright, set in the year 6. I want to thank you so much,
Ceres Wright,
for being a part of this conversation on the future history of Black America.
It was my honor. Thank you so much.
Folks, we have had a time of our lives just kind of thinking differently, if you will, about the future. We've been talking to Ceres Wright. She is an author of the book COG, which was published in 2013 on the Dog Star Books, which is a science fiction imprint of the Raw Dog Screaming Press. She's very much connected to the cyberpunk community and the solar punk community. And as we heard it, in a few years, few months maybe even, we'll be hearing more about Afro solar punk. So we want to say thank you again.
Thank you.
And invite all of us to remember that the future we want is embedded in the landscape of our current lives. We want to be reminded always that We together create this future. So seize the day and shape your future. Until next time, safe journeys.
You have been listening to the Futures Forum Live online. This podcast aims to tell and share stories about the emerging future and help us better shape the future we want. The Futures Forum Live online is a production of the Futures Forum in Washington, D.C. For more information, visit www.thefuturesforum.org. Get future sense now. Remember, our future is embedded in the landscape of the present. Share this story and share the future.